Florida Congressman Byron Donalds and New York Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. Great to see you both. Byron, we just heard Tom Homan's a tough cookie. We all know that. You can't intimidate him anyway, anyhow. But, some of those folks that are being targeted have young children at home. This says a lot about our culture, and he's putting the blame right on all the hate talk coming from the Democrats during the campaign. Do you?
Look, I don't want to assign blame right now, but I will tell you that I do agree with Tom Homan in the sense that we're not going to be intimidated by this. Not just Tom Homan, but I know Claudia and my colleague, Elise Stefanik, her and her family, her team, they're not going to be intimidated by this. We were given a mandate by the voters. Donald Trump was given that mandate, and we're going to get the job done for the American people. Now, if it is attributable to these radicals on the left, you're going to be held accountable. Rest assured of that. Because the American people, number one, are sick of the crazy divisions in our country politically. But number two, they're also crazy of the terrible policies that have been happening here domestically and have been happening across the globe. So President Trump's team is going to get the job done. They're going to follow the lead of the next commander in chief, Donald J. Trump. He's not going to be intimidated, and neither are they.
Congresswoman, it really puts a fine point on what I think is the weakest link in our national security, and that's the Department of Homeland Security. I mean, they're in charge of the border. They've done a horrible job with the border. Of course, a lot of the blame goes to Mayorkas, the secretary of that department, but there's a lot of blame to go around from this administration. And then, of course, they're also in charge of Secret Service. We saw what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, when they dropped the ball. They admitted they dropped the ball on that one. Really shows. Kristi Noem is Donald Trump's pick to head up the Department of Homeland Security. She's got a job ahead of her.
Oh, absolutely. And look, at Mayorkas deserves much of the blame. It's why we voted to impeach him in the House, not just for the border, but his mishandling of the entire Homeland Security situation, which is a huge agency, by the way, covers all kinds of issues. And remember, Lee Zeldin, also our former colleague, his house was bombed. I think there was some kind of bomb in his house. He wasn't there, thankfully, but he's one of our colleagues, ran for governor, nearly got there, and I wish he had. Would be wonderful. But look, we've got to stand up to these people. This is what terrorism looks like. This is local, domestic terrorism. A lot of the hysteria on the left, does get people incited. And we also, remember, have all these illegal immigrants in our country right now who are threatened by the incoming President Trump administration, because we will stand up for law and order. We will see equal justice under the law. We will see the enforcement of our borders. We will see Kristi Noem team up with Tom Homan to make sure that our country is safe and that we're secure. And people who are illegal immigrants who are here committing crimes, they're going to be deported. And that's what Tom Homan's talking about. And this is getting people who've had a free ride for the last 4 years, whether it's them or proxies that are giving them the resources to do this, or they're just lone wolves. We don't know. But look, people are going to be held accountable now. It's time that we go back to law and order. And I'm really excited about the administration getting down to business and putting really great people on the team.
Yeah, well, you talk about the illegal migrants, particularly those who've committed crimes. They know that they're on notice. But Congressman Donalds, we also have Iran. We know that they attempted to kill Donald Trump using proxies here in the U.S. We know that he was the last candidate that they wanted to become president or president-elect. Do you think they had a hand in this? And do you trust those in authority now to do the job and hunting down who is responsible?
To the question about Iran's involvement, I don't know the answer to that, so I don't want to speculate.
Yeah.
To the people in our law enforcement agencies, I mean, forget the political brass for a moment. We know that the political brass in a lot of these agencies has been corrupted, but there are good men and women who are patriots who serve this country every day, and we trust that they're going to get the job done in protecting, obviously, not just President Trump and his family, but all of his appointees and their families. As a nation, the time is now for us to come together, get past the petty politics, get past the divisions in our country, and move forward. And it starts with actually enforcing our laws. It starts with actually upholding what our institutions are supposed to be doing, not the rogue political missions of the radical left. Right. we get back to that, our country will come together. We will have more cohesion as Americans. That's the ultimate goal.
Well, Congresswoman, there is something called a bully pulpit, which is supposed to be owned by the commander in chief. We haven't heard anything. I mean, there have been some words from the White House about they're trying to track down exactly who's responsible and concerns. But we just don't have a bully pulpit right now. That's one of the jobs of the president, is to pull Americans together in times of crisis like this. It again leads to the question, who's in charge?
Look, everybody knows that Joe Biden is not competent to be the president of the United States right now. And so who's running everything? It's the people behind the scenes. But when you get back to who is in our country right now, I have the northern border. It's one of the reasons I co-founded the Northern Border Security Caucus in upstate New York and across our border. 85% of the people on the terror watch list actually come across our border, the northern border. They're coming into New York because
Great
our
point.
laws are lax, they're weak, they're against everything that the 9/11 Commission came up with. They violate federal law. I've been talking with Tom Homan about this. You know, Arizona versus New York. Actually, you know, the Democrats and the Biden administration are suing Governor Abbott down in Texas, claiming that, you know, he's violating federal law and we control the border. But you come to New York and they're saying, oh no, New York law, the green light law, not allowing the law enforcement to work together, giving illegal immigrants licenses and special status, and creating sanctuary cities, and which created and caused the death of Laken Riley needlessly. This innocent young girl, she had to be let go by the New York Police Department. We've heard this over and over. This is why it is so important to put people who actually stand up for the rule of law. This isn't about some right-wing, left-wing. This is about the rule of law, our great Constitution that was handed down to us, that is about human rights, but it's also about freedom and security. And we need to take that back so every American feels that they are getting equal justice under the law, and people who commit crimes are held accountable. It's just simple, common sense stuff.
And to your point about the northern border, that's why Canada was included in what Donald Trump said is coming in terms of tariffs if Mexico and Canada don't get on the ball. Just in the past year, we've had more illegal entries in the north of the border than we had in the previous 2 years combined. So it is an explosion at the northern border as well as the southern border, and a lot of those are bad hombres. All right, I want to pull back while I have you talk a little bit about the economy. Congressman, first to you, the job of cutting back the role of the government in our lives. Of course, DOGE is one of the first groups that we'll hear from in terms of how to do it. We're already getting stuff from them. Most recently, they just came out with a report. It actually came from a GAO analysis of the fraud and waste in Medicare and Medicaid alone. It comes to over $100 billion a year. Now, I'm sure the left is going to say, oh, they're going to be cutting back on Medicare and Medicaid, which they said they were going to do. No. This is just fraud and waste, and this comes from those watching over these organizations. That comes, by the way, over a 10-year period of $1.6 trillion. That alone is pretty close to Elon Musk's claim that he could cut $2 trillion over 10 years.
No, you're absolutely correct. Our federal budget is littered with a bunch of waste, a bunch of fraudulent payments. Everybody in Washington knows it. But quite frankly, you have half of Washington that doesn't want to do anything about it. It's much easier to just continue the spending and move on while everybody gives great speeches. We're $36 trillion in debt. We simply cannot do that anymore. You couple the waste and the fraud abuses in our budget with the litany of studies we do for stuff that really has no pertinence to the lives of the American people today. Then also you have procurement issues all through the federal government where we make payments for items we do not receive or we receive in massive delays. You have massive amounts of federal buildings that are still empty because employees have not come back to work. I mean, we're almost 3 years past COVID. They have not come back to work. These buildings are empty. We pay the light bill. We pay the rents on these buildings, and they remain empty. There is an entire avenue where you can get the $2 trillion over a decade that needs to be cut out of our budget. And then when you do that, you can actually restore pro-growth policies that Donald Trump wants to bring in. The time is now to take care of government efficiency. We have a mandate from the voters of America. Donald Trump has that mandate, and we're going to act.
By the way, one more for you, Claudia, and we're going to get into specifics of tax policy later in the show, but our state, and I call you Claudia because you and I are both residents of this state and have to pay taxes to it.
Semper Fi, but
we are in a fiscal mess. We have a $14 billion deficit, last I noticed. We have a top income tax rate of 11%. Byron, and we're going to use first names in this last question, you've got a wonderful state, a fiscal miracle of sorts. You have no state income tax, and you have a surplus of over $7 billion. Claudia, is there some way that we can get you and Byron together to talk to the people of New York to convince them that we need to use the Florida model instead of the model we're now using?
well, David, I've been saying this for a long time, and I've been on this show a number of times with Byron. Oh, excuse me, Byron. Sorry about that. That is really a mistake.
Easy.
Oh, that's unacceptable.
Sorry.
I love you.
Look at this. Byron and I could do a tale of two states. Everything you should be doing is being done in Florida. Everything you shouldn't be doing is being done in New York State. And Byron was in the legislature in Florida. I was in the legislature in New York. Let's just look at something right here. 10 years ago, New York State spent $60 billion on Medicaid. At the time, we were the largest spender of Medicaid per capita than even more than California and Texas combined, the two most populous states. Today, we're spending over $113 billion. There is a bombshell report that came out by the Empire Policy Center showing that there are over 3 million people of the 8 million people on Medicaid right now, or the Essential Plan, which is a Medicaid-like program, who are not eligible.
Right.
They're not eligible, but they're on this, getting full benefits paid for by New York taxpayers.
I'm getting a
and
rap.
Guess what the state income tax is in Florida? Zero.
Zero.
Guess who pays the highest taxes in the entire country?
I just have
New York.
quick question for you,
it.
Byron. Are you up for a tour of New York, your old state?
Listen, I would do anything I could to help my former state.
Okay.
But you are absolutely correct at the top. Florida, we do it right.
Yes.
We've been doing it right, and we're going to continue to do it right. We're going to lead the rest of the country. Come look at the Florida model. It works, and that's why there's a lot of New Yorkers who are making Florida their home.
Well, bring the Florida model back to New York. We would appreciate it right here. Great to see you both. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And to you.